purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. No person can deny.
And welcome to Freethought Forum. I'm Catherine Fahringer, the producer of this show, and your host for this program. Usually I do controversial issues, and today I'm going to put that aside and just have a really good, fun time with two very distinguished guests. I have Dr. James Reveley and Craig Phelon. Craig Phelon is a writer, reporter, and Dr. Reveley is practically everything, aren't you, Dr. Reveley?
I'm a jack of all trades. That's a little more suitable than Renaissance man. I try to avoid that. Jack of all trades is a little more applicable, I think.
Well, you've certainly done a lot of marvelous things, and this was quite a surprise when you told me you had done a book. So I have been looking for it, and I finally have mine, and I called the show. I called the show after the title of your book, if that's all right with you, vice versa.
That's great.
Is a foreign language really foreign? And in your book, you have declared that we all have a foot in the door of speaking a foreign language because so many words are the same. So tell me, could you just tell me, how did you get inspired to this anyway?
Well, I started taking Spanish 6 or 7 years ago, and I went to UNAM here. And you get a little bit advanced in age and you start taking a new language, and it's really frightening. I mean, really frightening. The time to learn languages as an elementary school student, or basically
I'll drink to that.
When you're much younger, 2, 3 years old. And you're taught some nouns and verbs and how to put a few things together, and you're just kind of thrown out the door. You have to pick up a lot of vocabulary on your own. So I started making a list of cognates, the words that do translate from one language to the other readily. And I had the list on my hands for some time, and I expanded it over a period of years. And then, about a year ago, I loaned the list to Heloise, a very dear friend of mine, a lady that writes hints from Heloise.
Yeah, all that scrubby stuff.
She, for her to let her stepson use. He was about to take Spanish at the high school level. And she contacted me almost immediately and told me that I should print this book. She said, you should do something with this, especially now with the free trade agreement possibly going to be signed into effect, and the fact that the business community is becoming much more aware of the fact that Spanish is a really important language to learn, plus the fact that there are so many people who speak Spanish that want to learn English. So I told her, well, that's a real good idea, but you have to have certain contacts, and there's a certain amount of money involved to get something like that off the ground. And we talked it back and forth, and she and I became partners in this little venture.
Oh, I see.
This printing venture.
I didn't notice. Who printed?
She's in the front. Heloise Inc. is...
there it is. Well, I didn't put that. I don't know why. I just didn't think that was that Heloise.
Part of the dedication is to Heloise. And so anyway, we put the book together, and it's been on the market a short time, just a few months, and it's beginning to pick up. And this is something that I think is going to be a long-term situation. But the basic idea is that people already know more of either language than they think. Mm-hmm. A great example is the word vice versa. You look at that and you think, you automatically know what it means. Well, it means the same thing in Spanish. The front of the text has a number of words on it that if you know them in English, you know them in Spanish. Mm-hmm. Mucha información esencial, necesario, instante, utilitario. And that's much information, essential, necessary, instant, and utilitarian.
Sounds a lot better in Spanish.
You know. I think my favorite example is I can picture an American citizen trying to explain to a Mexican policeman that there's been an enormous explosion. And I can just imagine the hands flying around in the air and the jumping up and down and all. And the truth of the matter is the phrase would be explosión enorme. So he already has it in his vocabulary. He just doesn't know it.
Yeah.
And that's the basic concept of the book.
Yeah.
And I've been real pleased with the acceptance by the public so far. Mm-hmm. And there's the business community especially is beginning to realize that a knowledge of Spanish in today's business world is is not a novelty anymore, it's a necessity.
Really is.
It really is.
I would like to ask Craig how he came to be fluent in Spanish when he comes from Boston, don't you?
Yes, I do.
When did you learn Spanish?
Well, I can't take credit for this, but you know, my wife is from Mexico, and I did study Spanish in high school, but by the time I got to the Southwest, I'd forgotten most of it. But I met this wonderful lady from Mexico. We met on the border. It was a long romantic story. I don't have time to go into it now. But we married, and I was kind of forced into learning Spanish, and I sort of remembered a little bit about my background. But little by little, we learned a lot of body language, a lot of trial and error, and strangely enough, I used a lot of what the words in the book, and some of them didn't turn out to be right, but I used that concept quite a bit in learning the language. I would say something and add an O to it, and give it a little Spanish pronunciation, and sometimes it worked.
And sometimes you can get hit for it too.
That's true.
For instance, in French, there's the word propre, which means clean. It doesn't mean proper, and that has caused some of my friends some confusion and trouble.
Embarrassment.
So, but this is a good concept, and
I remember for years the check or the bill at the restaurant is La Quinta, and the term the ranch or like the hotel, the La Quinta Inns here is La Quinta. And for any number of years, I used to call for a check in Mexico by saying, La Quinta, por favor.
I want to buy the ranch.
I think people were very polite, and they just kind of scratched their head and said, look at this fool. And they'd bring the check, but it was kind of embarrassing. I finally learned from friends of mine what the proper term was, and it's like,
oh, that's funny.
Lord.
I've been asking to buy the ranch.
You know, I've been wanting the ranch.
The bill could have been bigger than you expected.
It could have been a lot bigger, you're right.
Well, I'd like to see this catch on, and as far as I know, it has already, because I had a terrible time finding it.
Well,
I was either too late or too early. It hadn't come in yet, or it had been sold out.
I hope so. Most of the bookstores around San Antonio have it. If they don't have it, it's in their system, and people can ask for it.
I didn't have any luck at HEB at all. They really just carried books, I think, as a sideline, and that I couldn't find anyone who understood what I was even saying, and it was not a language problem we were having. And she was showing me the Barbara Cartland novels and things like that, and that wasn't quite what I was aiming for. So your premise also is that people, though, should start very young learning a language.
Yes, I think so. I think it's really important. The system in the United States, you know, you and I had talked a little earlier, and I certainly don't want to get anybody riled up. And we know this is the program to do that.
Oh, yes, as I say.
But the United States, for the most part, there's the old Teddy Roosevelt term is jingoism. There's a jingoistic attitude in the United States, which is, if you want to do business with us, you learn our language. And it's unfortunate that is such a mindset, because, I mean, just the opportunity to learn another language will expand your own horizons so much. There's so many words in Spanish or in other languages that aren't in English. There are so many phrases and subtleties and nuances and just beautiful things that you can express in another language, and it's an expansion situation. I think it should. I hope that realistically people can realize that trade with Mexico is not coming. It's here. It's been here for a long time here in this part of the country, and so many business people as well as just private individuals long ago realized not only the necessity for it, but the pleasure of a second language. And I feel that we should really include it in our curriculum at a much earlier age. It's just so important. And realistically, if you live in the Southwest or by now in almost any part of the country, the Hispanic population is rapidly becoming the largest minority in the United States, and it probably won't be a minority in the United States at a certain point in time.
It gets so large it's not a minority, then it's a majority.
That's right. And I have so many dear friends and patients that are Hispanic, and there's a mindset that's different from the Anglo mindset, and it's a wonderful mindset. I love to travel in Mexico because the people have this this wonderful attitude towards life in general that I've always appreciated, and I really hope that the day comes when we can see both cultures not necessarily merge, retain their identity, but really appreciate one another for the way they are. And I think that the language is a barrier that we can overcome very readily. Unfortunately, the Texas Education Agency doesn't even require second language in school. A lot of the students a lot of the schools offer language because some of the universities require it to get in. There are 26 public universities in Texas, and only 5 or 6 require a second language for admittance. So you really aren't required to take language in elementary school or middle school or high school. And I think it still dates back to that jingoistic attitude. And of all the stuff that I learned in high school that did me no good whatsoever, I just am amazed that we can't offer languages routinely and require that our students take a second language.
Much earlier.
Much earlier, you're right. I'd like to see it done on a kindergarten basis, an elementary school basis. That's when their minds are more open.
Now, Craig, when you had this romance on the border and you met this wonderful woman and you married her, you have children?
Yes, we do.
And are they bilingual?
Yes, they are bilingual, and we almost purposely promoted that.
Yes.
We spoke Spanish mostly in the home when they were very young, and so all 3 of them grew up speaking what I think is a very good Spanish. They learned it from their mother with a proper accent. You know, I can do okay, but my accent will probably never sound like a native accent. But theirs does, and they frequently correct me when I mispronounce words still. But I think that really has really helped them both in the language and the culture. We live in a bicultural family, which I think is probably the perfect family for South Texas.
I would think so. But on that on the accent thing, I had a cousin who went to Mexico City to go to school. I've wife, somebody from Savannah, Georgia, had this craving to go to Mexico City, but she did, and she fell in love with a guy from Central America, and they got married and lived there. And he still, after 50 years they've been married, he still teases her about her bad accent. And to me, she sounds just really, really great. But I guess you never, if you don't start very young, I guess is it ever possible to get the perfection that where you could pass as?
I don't know. I like to think that I sound to people who speak Spanish like Ricardo Montalban sounds to us.
Yeah, he sounds great. There's nothing wrong with an accent. I kind of like him.
But I don't think so. I really kind of doubt it. I think I don't sound.
But Dr. Reveley and I were talking. Go ahead.
I'm afraid I sound more like Chill Wills.
We were talking earlier about the bilingual education, which when I came here 23 years ago almost, I heard people talking about this. Oh, what a rotten idea, what a rotten idea. Well, I just come from Europe, from England actually, but we traveled a lot in Europe, and I always travel with my dictionaries. I don't expect the people of the country to speak my language, but most of them did. When they didn't, you could always fall back on a little French. But the thing about I've just lost my train of thought, which I tend to do with this. But I'm coming here from there with many languages. I got here and they were saying, oh, what a tacky idea. Oh, bad idea. I thought the bilingual meant that the young children were both learning each other's language. I thought the Mexican children would be learning English and the English children would be learning Spanish. And I thought it was a nifty idea. And I thought, how can they knock bilingualism? But the bilingualism didn't turn out to be what I thought it was. And how do you feel about that?
I think it's the same attitude again.
Only it's the other side.
You know, I'd like to think of myself as a really American kind of guy, but there's that closed door mentality to another language is just, it's ridiculous. It's just not realistic. And I'm not saying that everybody should drop what they're doing, go out and learn Spanish today. But I do think it's a bad idea to try to prevent the population from having access or learning that second language when realistically we're approaching a global economy. If we ever want any kind of global peace, it's going to take a certain understanding and interchange between cultures. And I think it's a bad idea to not learn those languages. And of course, when you learn one of the Romance languages, then hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier for you to learn some of the others. And I doubt that I'll ever become much of a French or Italian speaker, but I like Spanish. It's a wonderful language. There's things that if you say es enferma, that means that somebody is sick and they're not gonna get better. They're gonna die.
Really?
They are sick.
It's that
you say está enferma, that means they're sick, but they're gonna get better. It's a temporary thing. And we don't have that kind of subtlety in English. That just the word to or the verb to be has two different forms in Spanish, es and estar, and when you learn those and then apply it to your train of thought in a different language, it helps broaden your horizons in your other language. And I just think that the whole educational system should not be bilingual means that everybody that speaks Spanish has to learn English, which is what you were getting at, I think, a minute ago.
Well,
we're going to be bilingual. Sure, we'll teach these Spanish-speaking children to speak English.
Well, I thought it meant a nice exchange.
Yeah, it should be an exchange.
And I thought it was a neat idea, but then when I found out it was just one way, I thought, hey, I don't know about that. I thought they were just being kind of redneck down here because people are. We were talking earlier about accents. Now, my grandmother had a Scottish burr, and that was not that couth back in the 30s, which is a shame. But, yes, but what are we going to do about it? How can we change the world?
I wish I knew. You know, there's a lot of things we could do if we knew how to do that. I think that you've got one of the best ideas is the fact that you're on a personal basis, your family is already bilingual and bicultural. And I'm sure that even in today's day and time that you've run into strange looks and difficult situations in some places when you and your wife are together. You know, it's unfortunate. That's the way some people still are. I like to think that as much racism as is probably practiced in South Texas, the fact that the Hispanic and the Anglo community have been living with each other and alongside each other for as long as they have has made it a little bit easier here than it is in other parts of the country. I know there are still very subtle forms of racism practiced, but the Anglos feel that in some ways too. I read an article in the paper the other day about someone who had sent one of his Mexican co-workers or one of his foremen to the bank to get change, and they said that since he didn't bank at that particular bank, they wouldn't make silver change for him. And he came back and told this to the boss, but the boss said that he went down there all the time and got change, and even though he wasn't. And the foreman said, well, that's true, but they're treating me like a Mexican. I mean, this is the way I'm being treated. And he said that kind of subtle thing happens all the time, and to me it's despicable. But it does go on. But I think the main thing is that there is a groundswell, that people in each culture appreciate each other more all the time, and I'd like to see a lot of those barriers come down. And you know, we'll never get beyond the people who talk about mongrelization of races. You can't change those people that talk like that. I don't think. But there are a lot of us out there who do understand and care for and appreciate our neighbors of other cultures, and I think it's just going to take that day to day. You know, let's all work on this together, kind of thing. I think you're making a big effort there with your family. You know, the fact that your children are bilingual. Another few years, they'll probably be trilingual. You know, they'll take German in high school or something.
One of those working on it. My daughter goes to the multilingual program at Tafoya Middle School, which is one of the few really good bilingual education programs here. Unfortunately, it doesn't start until middle school, and I really agree strongly with you. We discussed this earlier that we need to start bilingual education, or not in a real sense, on a very early level. She's doing very well because she speaks Spanish and English. She's studying Japanese.
Well, that's a very clever choice.
So
she's going to change the world someday.
Well, I hope so. But the interesting thing is that our youngest boy is 8 years old and he's in 3rd grade, and she's teaching him Japanese words. And in fact, they have great fun insulting each other in Japanese.
So it's neither their mother or father can understand, right?
Right. Well, fortunately, we've learned a few words too, so we all. In fact, it's kind of a family project. We've all learned how to say "shut up, stupid" in Japanese.
Oh, great! Wonderful.
And we would not, necessarily say that all the time, but the children are learning. In my 8-year-old can sing some Japanese songs because my older daughter taught them some songs, so it's kind of catching in that way, and it's fun. But I really think that the Texas schools really should start at a very young age. I mean, just kindergarten. Just encourage it and have a half an hour a day, playtime in another language or something like that. It would be.
I always told I have 2 sons who are grown men now. And
what?
Oh yeah.
Well, I didn't know that.
Fully grown, yeah. I have a grandson since you saw
You're
me last.
joking.
Yeah. I have an 8-month-old grandchild. I told both my sons when they were in junior high school and high school that if they really wanted to take some courses that would do them well when they got out of school, take Spanish, typing, and home economics. And unfortunately, they didn't listen to me in any of those regards. It's like, oh man, I'm not going to do it. But there are some good signs on the horizon, I think. I read some statistics that show me that the population really is working towards this goal. The University of Texas at San Antonio, Dr. Pino, who heads the department out there, was quoted in the paper a while back at saying that they're trying to assimilate their business and departments with the Spanish, and they're not going to combine the departments, but they are stressing the need for interdepartmental work and the fact that a lot of people who are now taking business courses, are taking Spanish courses or taking other language courses, Japanese in particular.
Yeah.
And that
say Sony real well. Which isn't even Japanese.
The necessity is there, and these people apparently are recognizing that necessity. And a lot of people in the college level are now, before they graduate, trying to take language courses. But that's a very late age to start. We have to hope that they will continue on with that. On the UNAM last year, I saw that their classes increased from 1,200 students to 1,900 students from one year to the next. So that's a little over a third increase. So there's obviously a recognition by the public for how important the language is becoming. And I hope it happens just for their pleasure. It's been such a joy to me to be able to go south of the border and to converse even minimally, to walk out in the yard at someplace you're staying and chat with the guy that's out there cleaning up about the weather and how things are, and have him tell you, oh, there's some beautiful flowers down the street here, and make sure to walk down this way and enjoy the bougainvillea that's out in front of this man's house down here. And those little things like that just mean an enormous amount when you get into Mexico and South America, for that matter. I'm sure I've never been to South America, but
you're prepared.
Yeah, I'd like to think so, at least to get by.
Well, it's a wonderful dream, and I like it. But I read something yesterday that really sort of upset me. This is the cultural illiteracy of MBAs, and these were, this is from the Indiana University School of Business in Bloomington, and here is what the words they were given, and here is what their definitions are. Acrophobia is the fear of acronyms. I thought that was very good. Aaron Burr is Perry Mason. I mean, even simple things. Jehovah is Jesus. And Stradivarius, as in Rex. Now, what are they thinking of? Is that a dinosaur?
I think they're thinking of a dinosaur.
I think so. And I thought that was so amusing. Anyway, I made a copy each for you to play with. But it is kind of discouraging. Of course, if you did learn more languages, like you were talking about how useful they are useful in crossword puzzles, too. I don't know how people that don't know anything about languages can work a crossword puzzle all the way through, because there are lots of little French things that creep in and Spanish things. And then, of course, so much of our language has other roots, Latin and Greek, and it's amazing, even the Greek thing. If you know some roots, you've got a good start.
It's those roots that produce most of the cognates that I mentioned in the book. Your Greco-Roman Latin are the words that are commonly transfer back and forth. And zigzag, did you know that zigzag is Spanish? It's another cognate, the term zigzag. And it's words like that you don't think of. You would be thinking to yourself, how can I describe taking a zigzag to this man who speaks this other language? But he already knows that word. You know, it's.
Ooh, I wanted to ask about 3 words that I looked up and they weren't in here, and I was just wondering, what's the word for heretic in Spanish?
Fahringer, probably.
And I couldn't find atheist or what was the other one I was thinking? Infidel. Now, infidel would be the same, wouldn't it?
I would think. I don't know.
Would you, Craig? Do you know?
I know that atheist is atheista.
Well, that's very close, isn't it? We can add that.
But
We're going to make a little notation
I'm afraid I don't know infidel.
I don't know about infidel, but you're right. That's one that should
It sounds as if it ought to
translate
be.
back and forth.
Sounds promising, anyway.
I'll keep it in mind. We do, and as people read this, infidelity is about the same. As people, we made an address in the front of the book and asked people if they had other words that came to mind to please drop a note and let us know so we can research them and put them in the book.
Yeah. How did you go about doing this? Did it, I mean,
The book? Everything seemed to fall into place at one time.
Well, I mean, how did you find all these? You just wrote them down?
Oh, the words?
Popped into your mind?
No.
Or what did
I
you...
bought every Spanish-English dictionary I could find, and I read through them from start to finish. There wasn't any data processor involved or anything. I did it all on yellow legal tablets. And once first I went through and marked each one of them in a yellow marker, and then I went through and pulled all the words out, and then I had to take each list from each dictionary and assimilate them, because all of those, not every dictionary has the same words in it. I mean, there are some words that are left out of each one. So I had a half a dozen different dictionaries that I used as resource, and I had to get every one of those legal pads and put them all together and then list them all out by him. It was really a laborious task.
Yeah.
Just very painstaking.
It really sounds it.
It's a great way to learn the language, believe me.
Oh, I'll bet you've got all these words. Now, the only problem that I have is that some of these I wouldn't be sure how to pronounce.
Well, you kind of have, the book is not intended really as a textbook so much as it is for someone who has a little grip on either language and has other texts for reference. So if you want to find out, I mean, when you start trying to go into, we could have made this book this thick. But the idea was this is an addendum to whatever other text that they have in their use.
I see. Well, of course, I wanted to end up speaking fluent Spanish by the end of the 30-minute program, so I guess I have a little bit more work to do. So I have some other books, actually, and I carried my little dictionary to Spain. Well, you can't believe it, but our time is running down, and is there any last little tidbit of information or anything you would like to say, either of you, regarding language, of course?
No, just if someone does speak Spanish and they're listening, and you need to make sure to teach your children. I have friends who were raised here 40 years ago, and it was such a strong feeling at that time that they actually did not want to teach their children Spanish in the home. And I know a lot of people who are now in their 40s, late 30s and 40s, who don't speak Spanish because their parents didn't teach them in the home. They just wanted them to learn English.
I think
that's it's a disservice, you know.
Being a linguist. Well, that is all we have time for today. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To duke or dictator, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, no person can deny.